everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I want to ask you to please remember to like and share these videos if you enjoy what I do, and so others can also find them. And also, please remember to subscribe to the channel. And make sure you click that little notification bell so you can be notified of my next uploaded videos. There has been a lot going on in the news lately over the last few months, from natural disasters to war. The latest battle going on in Palestine with Israel and basically committing genocide on the Palestinians on their own land because they want to take that land. And they have foreign backing by the U.S. and other Western countries because for them it's vital to keep a white nation in the Middle East so that they can access the resources of the various different countries. And their MO is to keep constant conflict going on over there so that they can access and steal those resources. But that's not the only place that MO has occurred. It's occurred over and over again in Africa. One of the richest pieces of land in Africa, the DRC, or Democratic Republic of Congo, has been experiencing this since the invasion of King Leopold, as he used it as his own personal playground and massacred millions and millions of Congolese people during his time there. Those things are still going on today with the backing of foreign powers. Their goal is to be able to continuously access the resources there while keeping the people in constant conflict among themselves, killing each other, and distracted from what's really going on and distracted from who their true enemy is. And what's worse is if you go to the U.S. government's website or the UN's website, you will see that they have been keeping track of this silent genocide that has been going on in the Congo since the 1990s. Yet they've done nothing about it, because to do something about it would mean no more access to the minerals. I found a pretty good explanation of what's been going on this website called Genocide Tracker. And I want to read to you what it says to give you an idea of what's been going on since the 90s. And surprisingly, who is one of the biggest backers of what's going on now. So let's take a look at this. Let's just briefly go through the Global Conflict Tracker website to get a little understanding of what's going on in the Congo. It states that the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, has experienced a spike in violence in the latter months of 2023. Clashes involving militant groups over territory and natural resources, extrajudicial killings by security forces, political violence, and rising tensions with neighboring countries have contributed to high rates of civilian casualties and displacement. Following years of popular protests, Kinshasa ordered international and regional peacekeeping forces to leave the country, which have been accused of abusing civilians and labeled ineffective by officials. The order comes as DRC prepares for a highly contested presidential election in December 2023 and faces growing violence in its resource-rich eastern provinces. In October, the UN envoy to the Great Lakes region raised alarms about a potential direct DRC-Rwanda confrontation, citing a military buildup on the longtime adversaries' shared border. In addition to reports of mounting civilian casualties in eastern Congo, the UN declared that the number of internally displaced people had reached a record high of 6.9 million as fighting renders a growing part of the country unsafe for civilians. Now, as we get into the background of this conflict, it states that the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo has been ongoing since the 1990s. The country has faced political repression and instability since it achieved independence in 1960. DRC is the fourth largest African country by population and the most populous Francophone country in the world, and is home to an abundance of vital natural resources. Despite its massive human capital and resource endowment, peace has eluded the Congo and human security challenges have proliferated. Currently, Eastern DRC is the site of ethnic conflict and violent resource competition involving ethnic militias, Congolese security forces, UN troops, and complex external interests. Complex external interests are the foreign countries who have been backing this conflict so that they can continue to take advantage of the resources. Now, since 1996, conflict in Eastern DRC has led to approximately 6 million deaths. The First Congo War from 1996 to 1997 began in the wake of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, during which ethnic Hutu extremists killed an estimated 1 million minority ethnic Tutsis and non-extremist Hutus in Rwanda, DRC's neighbor to the east. Now, during and following the genocide, nearly 2 million Hutu refugees crossed the Congolese border, mostly settling in refugee camps in the North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. A small subset of those Rwandans who entered DRC were Hutu extremists who feared retribution or prosecution at home and began organizing militias within the Congo. Pressure intensified as Tutsi militias organized against the Hutu groups and as foreign powers began taking sides. Now, following the Rwandan Patriotic Front's victory against the genocidal Rwandan government, the new Tutsi government began its involvement in DRC, which was back then known as the Republic of Zaire. Rwandan troops under the leadership of Paul Kagame and Congo-based Tutsi militias with Rwandan backing launched an invasion of Zaire, which was ruled at that time by dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, and Kigali justified both efforts by arguing that Hutu groups in eastern DRC were still a threat to their own Tutsi population, and that the Mobutu regime was harboring Hutu extremists who had fled across the country's shared border. Rwanda waged war against Zaire with the help of other African states, most significantly Uganda, but also Angola and Burundi, who had their own security concerns related to Kinshasa's support of rebel groups across the continent. The invasion was coordinated by Zaire's then opposition leader, Laurent Kabila. Thousands died. Some casualties were former Hutu militants and members of armed groups, but many were refugees and non-combatant Congolese in the Kivu region. Methods of warfare were brutal, especially those employed by Rwandan soldiers and Tutsi groups. The Kabila-Kagame coalition won the First Congo War in 1997 when Mobutu fled Kinshasa. Kabila was installed as president of Zaire and changed the country's name back to the Democratic Republic of Congo. In 1998, the Second Congo War broke out following the deterioration of relations between Kigali and Kinshasa. In an attempt to diminish the impression that Rwanda held undue influence over the Congolese government, Kabila denied claims that Rwanda had been responsible for winning the war and placing him in power. Kabila also began removing ethnic Tutsis from his government and took measures to weaken Rwandan military hegemony in eastern DRC. By the late 1900s, it was becoming clear to the world that targeted campaigns against Hutu populations during the First Congo War, mostly led by Kagame's army, amounted to war crimes. a growing international consensus that reflected poorly on the fledgling Kabila regime. Now, I want to stop here for a minute. So just so that this is understood, the genocide that occurred in Rwanda, where the Hutus were killing the ethnic minority group Tutsis, spilled over into Zaire as refugees were leaving Rwanda, seeking refuge in Zaire away from the war that was going on in Rwanda. Well, they brought their war to Zaire and they began fighting in Zaire. Now, keep in mind, this genocide that occurred in Rwanda was French-backed. They financed it and they were backing it. So basically, this French-backed genocide from Rwanda spilled over into the Congo, or what was known as Zaire at that time. And so the Tutsi and Hutu fought in the Congo or Zaire, and they got the people there involved, leaders there involved, and some of their people even took power in the Congolese government, of course, French-backed, because if they could get people that would do their bidding, they could get access to the resources. So basically, this region of the country faced genocide under King Leopold, and then genocide as the French-backed genocide from Rwanda spilled over into Congo, all for resources, which later on then became backed by the U.S., and as you'll learn later in this, presently backed by China. I'll continue so you can see how this progresses. Now, we talked about the Second Congo War breaking out in 1998. And as we go on down, in a reversal of alliances, Kabila ordered all foreign troops out of the Congo and allowed Hutu armed groups to organize at the border once again. Rwanda responded by invading in 1998. Kigali's stated aim was to create a zone in the DRC-Rwanda borderlands controlled by its own troops in order to create more distance from Hutu groups in eastern DRC. Congolese forces supported by Angola, which also reversed alliances following the ascent of Laurent Kabila, Namibia and Zimbabwe fought the Rwandan, Ugandan, and Burundi militaries, as well as various rebel groups supported by Kigali and Kampala. In 2001, the war raged on despite repeated promises of ceasefire and the presence of UN peacekeepers. Amidst the chaos, Laurent Kabila was assassinated in a coup attempt planned by his own aides and guards. Those involved were imprisoned, and Kabila's son, Joseph Kabila, took power. The Second Congo War was formally brought to a close under the Junior Kabila in 2002, and while estimates vary greatly, the death toll of the Second Congo War and the associated humanitarian disaster may have reached over 3 million people by 2004. So here we see power just being handed down like it's a right among the family and not through democratic means where the people voted. Now, as we get into 2002, 2003, Rwanda, Uganda, and DRC began implementing a set of peace agreements that authorized a transitional government in Kinshasa led by Joseph Kabila. Despite these agreements, the establishment of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and the presence of a renewed UN peacekeeping force, unrest and clashes persisted in eastern DRC. Kabila was inaugurated following a long-awaited popular election in 2006. One of the most prominent rebel groups to emerge in the early 2000s was known as the March 23 movement, or M23, made up primarily of ethnic Tutsis. Between 2012 and 2013, M23 became an undeniable force in eastern DRC, and Kinshasa accused Kigali of backing the group. In 2013, the UN Security Council authorized a rare offensive brigade under the mandate of the UN Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC, MONUSCO, to support the Congolese army in its fight against M23. So still we see that the spoils of the genocide that occurred in Rwanda is still going on at this time, spilling over into the Congo. So now the M23 had called off its initial campaign in 2013. But evidence of Rwanda's support of M23 caused lasting damage to the Kigali-Kinshasa relationship. The clash over M23 led to a frost in diplomatic relations that lasted until 2022. Other flashpoints have arisen over the past 2 decades in states on the Congo-Rwanda border, such as Ituri, most often involving ethnic and militant groups with contestations going back to the Congo Wars. The 21st century brought one more complication to peace efforts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is the proliferation of mining operations. DRC is home to some of the world's largest reserves of the metals and rare earth minerals that are used in the production of advanced electronics. As the world has become more reliant than ever on cobalt, copper, zinc, and other minerals, foreign actors, multinational companies, and local armed groups have become more incentivized to get involved in the Congolese conflict. I feel like this part is a misrepresentation because they have been secretly involved. They have sent in, paid militant groups, paid paramilitary groups to keep these conflicts going. And we know that the conflicts really initially started due to foreign backing, France being one of the main ones. Now, weak governance and the presence of various armed groups have subjected Congolese civilians to widespread R-word and S violence, massive human rights violations, and extreme poverty. The African Union, United Nations, and neighboring countries have struggled to address threats posed by rebel groups, promote development, and improve humanitarian conditions. Violence in the DRC may eventually spill over into Burundi, Rwanda, and Uganda, countries with long-standing ties to the United States. The abundance of natural resources, especially precious minerals found in Congolese soil, has globalized the conflict in eastern DRC. While U.S. companies once owned vast cobalt mines in the Congo, most were sold to Chinese companies during the Barack Obama and Donald Trump administrations. Chinese companies connected to Beijing now control the majority of foreign-owned cobalt, uranium, and copper mines in DRC, and the Congolese army has been repeatedly deployed to mining sites in eastern DRC to protect Chinese assets. The nerve. You take these countries' resources. So basically, one white country has sold the rights to these minerals to another white country without the consent of the people who are there because they have been busy fighting among each other. And these fights have been financed by the very people who are taking the resources. They need to wake up in the Congo. So, as I stated, that the majority of this had been sold to Chinese, and they're using the country's own military to protect these mines, to protect their assets. So the Joe Biden administration has acknowledged that China's virtual monopoly in DRC's mining industry plays a significant role in boosting China's comparative advantage in the energy and technology arenas and is a hindrance to U.S. clean energy aspirations. So he's more concerned with how China's access to this is affecting the U.S. than he is about the genocide that's going on over there. And to make matters worse, China is involved in Congo's internal conflict as well as its economy. The Congolese government is fighting M23 rebels with the help of Chinese drones and weaponry, and Uganda has purchased Chinese arms to carry out military operations within DRC's borders. The deals China negotiated with Congolese leadership, especially during the Joseph Kabila regime, have helped Chinese firms secure unprecedented access to metals that allow them to mass produce electronics and clean energy technologies. The Beijing-Kinshasa relationship came under international scrutiny, leading to President Kabila's resignation in 2019 when evidence emerged that Chinese capital intended for infrastructure investment as repayment for mining rights was being funneled to Joseph Kabila and his associates. China and DRC's complex multi-layered economic and military relationship has resulted in limited access to the Congo's vital resources and profits for other countries and the Congolese people themselves. Additionally, a U.S. Congressional Human Rights Commission heard testimony in July of 2022 regarding the use of child labor and other illegal practices in Congolese mines, allegedly including those owned and operated by Chinese companies. Russia also maintains a relationship with DRC since its February 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Moscow has been courting various African states, including the Congo, for support. While DRC voted in favor of a February 2023 resolution to condemn the war and demand Russia's withdrawal from Ukraine, other African countries with strong ties to Moscow abstained or voted in opposition. The Western coalition strives for a globally united front to counter Russia, and the Kremlin's growing ties to African states are a threat to that goal. While the United States does maintain a trade relationship with DRC, it enforces strict reporting requirements on imports from conflict-affected states and bans on importing conflict minerals, which are resources such as tin and gold mined for the profit of armed groups in the Congo and neighboring countries. Between these restrictions and the recent Chinese dominance in the Congolese mining market, U.S. economic interests in the Congo are relatively minimal. The United States imports roughly $4 million of precious metals and stones from DRC annually, compared to more than $7 billion in Congolese metals alone imported every year by China. Now, in recent developments, opposition leader Felix Tshisekedi was declared the winner of DRC's December 2018 elections and was inaugurated in January of 2019. The transfer of power from former President Joseph Kabila, who ruled for 18 years and delayed the elections multiple times, marked the first peaceful transfer of power in the DRC's history. However, the election results have since been questioned. Technical issues and irregularities, including delays that affected over 1 million people, marred election day. Some polling data indicates that a different opposition leader, Martin Fayulu, may have actually won. Upon his inauguration, Tshisekedi inherited a number of crises, including outbreaks of Ebola and ongoing violence in eastern DRC. In 2022, despite the formal normalization of relations, renewed tensions mounted between DRC and Rwanda. M23 rebels resurfaced after 5 years of inactivity and began escalating attacks against Congolese troops. The group secured significant territory along the Rwandan and Ugandan borders. Kinshasa accused Kigali of funding and supporting M23's resurgence, an accusation supported by the African Union and the United States. In return, Kigali accused Kinshasa of once again supporting Hutu extremists, militias, and increased its military presence inside the Congo. Rwanda and Uganda and militias with their support have financial stakes in Congolese mines, though they are not always legitimate, adding fuel to the fire. Rwanda and DRC have been on a war footing since the end of 2022. President Tshisekedi engaged in diplomatic talks with Rwandan representatives in November, resulting in a delicate and ultimate ineffective ceasefire. As of spring 2023, indications have surfaced that M23 is drawing back some of its forces. However, the Congolese military and residents of eastern DRC continue to contend with increasing attacks by the Islamic State-affiliated Allied Democratic Forces and other groups. DRC's relations with its neighbors remain charged, including those with Burundi and Uganda, in addition to Rwanda. In 2023, DRC is home to an estimated 5.7 million internally displaced people in urgent need of more than $2 billion in medical and other aid. Nearly 1 million Congolese nationals are seeking refuge in other African states. Exacerbating this need for assistance, the UN has had to suspend air deliveries of aid to certain eastern provinces in the face of attacks on its convoys. While in France, to urge the European Union to support peace talks in DRC and sanction Rwanda for its support of M23, President Tshisekedi also raised the specter of delaying national elections. So M23 agreed to a ceasefire with the Congolese government in March of 2023, but violated it shortly after and declared another one in April. Nonetheless, the fragile truce has done little to alleviate violence, which continues to come in waves. Casualties remain on the rise and armed groups attack. Displacement camps, civilians in the DRC and abroad, and self-defense groups. In May, the South African Development Community agreed to deploy troops to eastern Congo to assist UN forces ahead of the December 2023 elections. However, a month later, the UN announced a planned withdrawal of the largely unpopular PDF Moscow peacekeeping mission, a decision the United States called premature. UN officials have acknowledged that the drawdown poses the risk of a security vacuum amid a deteriorating security situation in Ituri and North Kivu. In essence, the paymaster has changed, but the tactics of confusion for the sake of stealing has remained the same. From Belgium to France to the US to now China, these paymasters will continue to keep this country in a constant state of turmoil merely for the sake of resources, and they don't care if they kill each other to the very last Congolese person. The people of this region need to stop believing that their neighbor who looks just like them is their enemy, and they need to open their eyes and see who their true enemy is and fight that enemy and unify among themselves so they can build their country, control their resources, and have no need for outside people to come in for any reason whatsoever. But as long as they stay blinded, the mass genocides will continue, and there will always be an outside foreign force from a white group of people who will continue to fund your genocide and the constant war and turmoil going on in your country. This is something that I'm sure a lot of people won't say, but if you take some notes from, say, Traore, who has taken control of Burkina Faso and a lot of its resources and is taking control of the pricing to make sure his country benefits and his people benefit. There's some notes that could be taken from that situation. But until the fighting stops and the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo realize that they are not each other's enemies and put their focus on who their true enemy is, we will continue to see the genocides occur, and we will continue to watch the world ignore it. Well, guys, that's all I have for you today. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories that I bring you, please give me a thumbs up so that more people can view these stories. It can give me a push in the algorithm here on YouTube. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click that little notification bell so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. Also, please leave a comment below on what you think about what's going on in the Congo today, the genocide that's occurring. Tell me what you think below. And I'll see you in my next video.